Hi, this is Sapin Bhartiya. We are here at openSUSE conference in Nuremberg, Germany, and today we have with us Neal Gompa. You are a Fedora contributor.
Yeah.
So, first of all, how did they let you in?
I think we've been friends as distributions and communities. We've been friends for years, and I've made it kind of a point to be unlike some people and actually go and branch out a little bit everywhere. There's a lot to learn from every community, so I take a little bit to go everywhere, and it's a lot more fun that way. And so far, nobody's gotten too angry at me, so I think everything's okay so far.
Well, if you had Fedora written all over you, then it would be, but you have systemd there.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Yeah. I could come with my Flock T-shirt, and that would be interesting. But this openSUSE sponsored that last year.
Exactly. That's the whole point. You guys are, and that's what open source is all about.
Yeah, exactly.
But Red Hat and SUSE sales teams may compete, but engineers and developers, they work together to improve the project.
Exactly. And at the end of it, what we want to do is provide an excellent projects, products, solutions, and things like that. And we just want to work together to make the best stuff because we all have different perspectives, and that helps work. And those different perspectives help make a better thing, whatever it may be, even if it's a Linux distribution or a tool or whatever. And even though we have some differences, Fedora and openSUSE haven't smushed together into one super distro yet. We have some differences. We can still collaborate on a wide variety of things, and I continue to hope that we will do more things together over time because we have a lot in common, and we can do a whole lot more together, even if we're doing some things separately.
Tell us a bit about the things that are common, which you share, and which you work on together. I can name some too, but I want to hear from you.
So most of the time, I'm kind of a low-level guy, so I tend to work with a lot of the plumbing tools and distributions. So for example, we have systemd in common. We use systemd. We share a lot of the packaging mechanisms for systemd and things like that. We use RPM as our package manager, so we share a lot of the guidelines and rules. The current set of openSUSE packaging guidelines was forked from the Fedora packaging guidelines several years ago, and they made some tweaks and adjustments for openSUSE policies, but it's more or less very similar to what we have in Fedora. It makes it so that, by and large, when you look at what we're trying to do at the plumbing layers, between even as low as the init ramifest all the way up to your basic libraries and structures and file things that make up how your GNOME desktop is set up. They're very similar. And even in the upstream projects, we tend to have, there's Red Hatters and SUSE engineers working together across many different things. So it's good to see that those kinds of things are happening. I don't work for either Red Hat or SUSE, so it makes for a very fun outside looking in kind of perspective on how all of these guys tend to work together on these things.
Can you talk about some of the collaboration that happened between openSUSE and Fedora communities?
One of the bigger things that we've been doing lately, not really bigger per se, but one of the things that we do is that because Fedora uses Libsoft, which is a SAT solver library for package management for the DNF package manager, and SUSE uses it for Zipper. There are instances where Red Hatters and Fedora contributors, we find issues and bugs, and we make patches and submit them, and they get merged and they're part of releases and things like that. Actually, the Libsoft project in particular, one of the co-maintainers of it is a Fedoran. Doesn't work for Red Hat, right? But he's a Fedora contributor, and he's an upstream co-maintainer along with Michael Schroeder, who is the SUSE guy who created the project. So Fedora and openSUSE tend to work together in that project, and in Drakit, for example, the guy who maintains Drakit in openSUSE works with the guy who develops it at Red Hat a lot. Work on making stuff work better and things like that. And of course, in systemd, they're doing a bunch of things here and there. So there's not a singular big thing. There's not a singular big thing that we work on together, but there's a lot of little things where we just kind of naturally come together because we're often trying to solve the same problems, and it's better to not duplicate ourselves all over the place because it leads to unfriendly things in the end, and we just don't want that. And ARM is another one where like SUSE did a bunch of work making the EFI things and getting a lot of the early stuff in there because they're really good at the exotic things. And then we come in and we finish a lot of that other things, and we've started we collaborate a little bit here and there on making the platform stuff work for like new architectures and things like that. Fedora did a lot of the bootstrapping work for RISC-V, and openSUSE has taken some of that early work, and they've started rebootstrapping Tumbleweed Factory for RISC-V. It's all of it is in bad state right now, but like it's starting to happen. So like there's a lot of sharing kind of things happening there to make things like this all successful. So there isn't a single like big thing going on, but there's a lot of little things here and there. And I think that's actually probably the right way to do it because it's more organic and independent groups of people start trusting each other more, and it just works out to be a stronger, I guess to be cliche, a web of trust.
Right. Let's put you in a spot. You said, there are a lot of things you guys don't agree with.
Yeah.
What are those things?
If I'm going to be a little nitpicky here, like some of the places that SUSE puts things on the file system are, I think, completely asinine and stupid. And, Fedora doesn't allow some of those things. Some of the ways that things are packaged or shipped or organized, it's the little nitpicky things that tends to be the stuff where that tends to make up those differences. On the balance of things, the larger shape, things tend to be more similar than different. I guess the biggest difference in terms of like how the two distributions tend to handle things is like, for example, the way that the distribution is built in Fedora and openSUSE is quite different because there's different priorities based on like what we care about in terms of what we want to come out of our tooling. So it's not perfect. I would love to have some things that openSUSE has in our tooling, and I'm sure there's some of the SUSE people, there are some things that are nice about our tooling that they'd like to have as well. It's just we're not all there, and if it was all able to be in one thing, that'd be great, but that's not how it is right now.
So Linux dominates everywhere it touches, and with Microsoft it may go in the hands of 95% of the users. Mm-hmm. But desktop is the only place where it has not replicated the same success.
Right.
Some might call it a failure because it's been around for 27 years, and some may say it's still working. So what do you think attribute or contribute to this fact that this is the only place where Linux has not managed to have a dent?
I think it's actually partly a historical accident. So what kind of happened in the early days was when these Linux distributions were starting up and the Linux companies were making the desktop Linux products. It was during a time where it was very difficult to get the Linux platform like working on computers, and so that made it difficult to make it as an attractive platform. But at the same time, Microsoft had made Windows so utterly dominant that it was starting to create a virtuous cycle in itself. This was like in the early 90s and things like that. By the time that the Linux distributions had started having like polished experiences in the early 2000s, things were kind of locked in. But the dynamics of that have also opened up opportunities because like Unix was dying around the same time. And so it was a very quick pivot for a lot of the companies, the ones that survived, to switch from desktop focus to servers so that they could make a buck and keep going. Some of the companies, like for example Red Hat, and to a lesser extent SUSE, what they've done is that they've taken that server money and put a little bit aside of it to help make the desktop better, in the hope that eventually the desktop will be at a point where they could even sell that as a product and actually be successful. And I think we're actually getting very close to that. The dynamics of the market have changed things as well. The normal desktop computers tend to be used by people that are of a higher technical caliber than in the past. And that changes the dynamics of who would want to use this. And also with the things like privacy and security starting to matter more to people. I'm not necessarily saying that the Linux kernel and system architecture is necessarily more secure than, say, Windows, but a lot of the decisions of like how these distributions are built, the security conscious decisions, how the software is laid out, stuff like that tends to lead to a more obviously privacy secure focus. And that's an appealing thing for some people. Like one of the reasons why I run Fedora on most of my computers is because I like having a strong mandatory access control system with SE Linux. I like having security built into most of the layers and how the software is built. And I like that I can have some idea of trust of how the software was built and delivered to me, so that I can verify that nobody's done something weird to my computer in the process. Right. So I think as more people start feeling about that, then that'll make it more appealing. But on the flip side, with the new WSL stuff that Microsoft's been doing, I'm a little conflicted because now they've made it so easy to be Linux without it, to use Linux without it, and that's the thing is, like, the people that would normally be on the fence who'd kind of like maybe tilt towards Linux with Windows subsystem for Linux 2 would not necessarily tip over. And maybe that's a good thing, maybe that's a bad thing, I don't know. I feel like it's probably a bad thing, but because it's a downer for security and openness and privacy and all these things. No matter how you shake it, Windows as a platform is not a platform that's easy to introspect or understand or protect. And it's just how that kind of rolls. So I think we will eventually get there. It will require some shakeups in how like the market views computers. And it also helps that games are starting to come to Linux. Once you win the enthusiasts, like everything kind of trickles down from there. Because like we've always had a hard time in the Linux world getting the enthusiasts who like to get performance out of their machines, who want to do very interesting things like AV work, games, stuff like that. That's been the hard stuff. And now we've started to get to the point where that stuff is working. Like we have a litany of great tools for doing AV work on Linux. And game development is now possible on Linux. I mean, I've done it. A number of people I know are game developers professionally who do it on Linux. Even if they're not releasing for Linux right now, they're doing it on there and they're able to successfully get their jobs done. And so much open source software is the foundation of those things. I foresee that as that keeps building up, we're going to see there will be a tipping point and people will start using it more. Because if you can have a secure platform that you can customize and tune and tweak it for your use cases, and it's easy for you to comprehend, that's a huge win.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you, yeah. So, Neal, thanks so much for talking to me today.
Yeah, I've had a nice time talking to you, Swap, now.
Yeah, and I look forward to talking to you again at the next either Flock or openSUSE conference.
Hey, if you're there at either, I'm happy to chat again.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you.